Excited to talk with you.
Yeah, me too. It'll be a fun topic today.
What is the topic today?
You sent it out.
Did I?
Yeah, you did yesterday or earlier this week, didn't you?
I'm just teasing. Yeah, I did.
I was gonna say.
Awesome. Just a bunch of handsome fellows so far. We'll see where it goes, but all I know is just a bunch of handsome fellows so far.
Yeah, and you got to have facial hair, apparently.
It's a cool club to be in. I'm just saying.
My son has a beard about like yours, Jesse. Maybe bigger now. I don't know. He's straight out of the 1800s. That's what I tell him.
Good morning, Becca.
Morning.
Morning.
Famous,
This is really
famous
fun.
Becca.
Oh, gosh. This is always fun to jump on here and just like, who's here today? You have no idea.
Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. I teach people to live and leave a lasting legacy with infinite banking. In today's roundtable, we're going to be addressing a couple of subjects. Firstly, we're going to address the idea that savers might be losers. And then the second is going to be, why would I pay interest on my own money? I hope that you enjoy these themes. Put your comments below. Awesome. All right, everybody got a book handy that wanted to have a book handy?
Yep.
Again, for everybody that's catching these guys for the first time, if you're wanting introductions, make sure to go to the interview series on my channel where you can hear from Mark and Becca and Tricia and everybody that's here to get their origin story with infinite banking. Otherwise, good morning, y'all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm happy to be here. Let's dive right in on something. Let me ask Tricia, would you pick a number between 3 and 86?
Okay.
Tell us what it is, please.
22.
All right, Becca, go to page 22 in the book.
And
Nothing like being
us-
on the spot. Yeah.
Yes. And give us something. It's in the Creating Your Own Banking System Through Dividend-Paying Life Insurance part of the book. That's what the title is. I'll preface and buy you a little bit of time, but not too much. I want to get this. But I'll preface by saying, Nelson does give a scripture here. You should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest, is how it reads in the book. And that does come from, it comes from the parable of the talents, which is where I even got the name Durham Talents. So I love this parable. I love this idea of, banking and making through dividend-paying life insurance. Give us something from page 22, Becca.
Okay. I'm going to start with the very first sentence and go from there. He says, to make the plan work, the owner must make payments into it, and the company, the hired help, must put the money to work in order to produce the benefits that are promised. So, to me, what that says that I love about dealing with whole life insurance is that I have somebody who's built in part of this system who is putting that money to work. And I don't have to be an expert in that. They're going to go do their thing. They've been profitable for over 200 years. They've, it's to the point that they can guarantee that this will never go down. So I think that's pretty powerful, that my money could be working in a system for me without me even having to think about it. Now, if I want to take that then and go do something else with it that's profitable, then that's icing on the cake. But I don't have to be an expert in all things because my money's already working in the background on a contractually guaranteed, proven basis while I go do whatever else I want to with it. That's my takeaway from 30 seconds on page 22.
I love it. I tried to buy you some time, but again, I like those fresh, authentic, moments. So before some things strike me. Does anybody else, see anything in that section that we just read, heard what Becca's, takeaway is? Were you struck by something? If not, I do, but I want to hear from y'all.
Well, I just like the fact that the risk is on the insurance company and not me, by virtue of the fact that it's their responsibility to put it to work, and that I get that guarantee no matter what, but they take the risk.
All right, so risk being a big element. Anybody else got something just burning in you know you want to convey from this section?
I have something from another section, but not that one.
Right.
Something that this section is making you think of from another section, or just completely separate?
It was separate, but I think just tying off of like what Tricia was saying was not, it isn't just that it's guaranteed. It's like, this is a private contract. And if you want to be in business for a long time, you have to make good on your contracts. You have to do it. Otherwise you don't have a company. So, and when we think about the contractual side of, contract law and all that stuff, what I think is just so cool about that is it's a private system, and we don't have to be involved with anybody else. It's between us and the company, and they are guaranteeing by contract that they're going to fulfill and do these things. Not only those things, but there's also the aspect that that guarantee is more than just what the company says. It's also mandated by states and some of the other things too. So from that angle, it is really secure, and it gives us a lot of confidence that they're going to fulfill and do exactly what they say, not only because they've said it in the contract, but they're also bound to it by contractual law, which is another way to think about it. If somebody needs a higher level of authority, so to speak, to validate that the contract's going to do what it says it does.
Oh, could I add one thing to that now that we're going down this trail?
Go ahead.
I think another really huge benefit is the fact that we work with mutual companies. And I don't know, Joe's probably said this on this podcast before because he hammers on it all the time. But the value of mutuality, of sitting on the same side of the table, of not being opposed to each other. I win, you lose. You win, I lose. But what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? For a good old southern saying there. The company is looking out for its best interest, right? Like any good company would do. But it just so happens that as we are part owners in the company, those are our best interests too. So there's no conflict there. Mm-hmm. Everybody's pulling the same way. Everybody is, we're all working towards the same goals, instead of, well, I'm just going to make sure I get paid and hope that works out for you.
So I'm hearing guarantees, I'm hearing privacy, I'm hearing risk mitigation, I'm hearing mutuality. Leverage really sticks out to me. I mean, so it is a connection to another part in the book, but think about how extensive the power grid system is, right? And when Nelson's talking about cogeneration and all that that's going on, think about visually, think about physically, how big the power grid system is, right? Well, financially speaking, that's what happens when we tap into that mutuality, is we get a lot of leverage. We're leveraging a behemoth of a financial institution anytime we're working with one of those mutual life insurance companies. I mean, it's just such a big, such a old, such a robust system that we can just tap into by being a policy owner. And we're maybe kind of particularly talking about features, but that's okay, because this is the section of the book where it's, Nelson specifically talking about dividend-paying life insurance from insurance companies. So leverage really speaks strongly to me. All right, anything else here? I'm gonna give another moment, or I'm gonna run another. All right, go ahead, Tricia.
I was just going to say, if you go down to the very next paragraph, it talks about that ability to leverage and how that gives the policy owner absolute control. So control is the other piece that I think is so incredibly important, besides the guarantees, is that you are, as the policy owner, you are the first option for borrowing against that, collateralizing that cash value. And so the life insurance company has to give you first dibs on that. And when you can borrow against all of the equity in that policy, and without question, without, completely privately, without an application, with all of the questions. Why are you going to use this money? What are you going to use it for? Do you have the credit needed for it? None of that is an obstacle in this situation. So it gives the owner complete control, which is also a huge boon.
Absolutely. Anything else here? All right, this is fun. Becca, give us a number, please.
Oh, well, now I know how this works.
3 to 86. 3 to 86.
Okay, I'm gonna throw y'all a bone, and I'm gonna say 85.
Interesting. All right, Mark. If you're going to get mad, you got to be mad at Becca. She's the one who picked it for you. All right, I'm going to page 85. Let's see.
Fair enough. That 85, which is the points to consider section, which a lot of times we refer people to say, hey, if you want to get a really good gist of what the book's about, kind of get a head start, read pages 3 and 4, which is the introduction, and read pages 85. So I recommend that to anybody, and then read the entire text, of course. But it's kind of gives you some bullet points. So what jumps out at me when I just turned to that page was point number 5. It says wealth has got to reside somewhere. Where would you prefer it to reside? And he goes on to break that down to real estate, the stock market, or, to his point, a free contract with other free persons, life insurance. From this base of financial operation, you can do any of the other things in life that you desire. And I love the flexibility of the infinite banking system. Hence the name infinite. You can do anything with you that you want to with it. So to me, that's extremely valuable, is the flexibility. I was even thinking about that in our prior discussion. We're not limited to just putting it in the bank and drawing interest like that scripture said. There were other guys in the parable of talents that got 5-fold and 10-fold increase. We can do whatever we choose to with this money without anybody watching over us. We get to make the decision, good or bad, what we do with that money. Okay, but we don't have any strings attached. And I loved that the flexibility is there to do with whatever. And what we see the most promise with, if you will, is people that use it for business purposes or to turn a profit. But you can use it for whatever you need, even the emergencies that crop up in life. So I like having a place to store money that's available for any use that I choose.
All right, I think everybody listening is going to have to rewind 2 minutes and listen to that again, because there were several just golden nuggets along the way. All right, Becca, you had that page in mind. That was a good page to throw out there. That's for sure good. Well, let me just kick it to y'all. Mark did mention several things. Was there something that spoke to you real strong out of one aspect of what he was talking about, from the flexibility to, again, the free? No, I shouldn't say that part. That's what struck me. What struck y'all?
I think one thing that stands out to me from that section, and really thinking about it from a different perspective as well, and we've had some similar conversations about it, is foundation. You create this basis of security, like we've just talked about, but you have this firm foundation in which all other things can reside upon. And the way that we think about even our faith, for example, by having a strong foundation, it makes our lives easier. It provides peace. It provides us the guidance on how we can go and help other people, communicate with others. When we do that financially, and that's what I really have come to learn more so about the infinite banking concept, is having that as my foundation. I can go do, just like what Mark was talking about, anything else that I wanted to do. But it's about thinking differently about that structure, about the asset of what it is. And when people try to, pigeonhole it into a product discussion, they're missing the entire concept. You completely missing what it's all about. And this is an opportunity for us to actually control the flow of money in and out of our lives and have this foundation that we can always rely on, because it's just like we talked about, it's guaranteed. It's safe. We have all these other benefits to it, at least on the product side, but we're also part owner in it too. And it's just amazing when you really strip it down to putting it in more of that context. And I know Joe tabbed this on a conversation I was on, even though he's not here, but he had called it the before asset. And when you start,
Yeah, quit talking about that guy so much. Get his name out of here.
and lay
Sorry,
it,
I didn't mean to mess up your flow, but anytime.
no, it's all good. But when you kind of lay it out that way and you start thinking about it different, it's really neat, interesting to see it from that perspective, and then to actually experience it. That's the part that's awesome.
Exactly. I was speaking to a prospective client actually just yesterday, and he was like, I've been thinking about whether I should do this or I should do this, and it was something else or the infinite banking concept. And I was like, you can do both. How about that? That's right. You can do this as your foundation. And then from there, if you still want to take those dollars and invest it, you certainly can. And by the way, it mitigates your risk at the same time.
Could you give us a little something more generally speaking, Tricia, there, just to give folks more color, more texture of like what in general was that person maybe considering doing?
They weren't super clear about that, but it was more like some kind of stock investing. So there was an element of risk in what he was considering. And so I was just like, well, let's just say, for example, you started this policy, you borrowed against it and used it to go ahead and do that stock investing. And let's say you experience some loss. You have experienced some loss of the life insurance company's money. Yes, you'll have an outstanding loan, but your dollars would still be growing inside of this foundational asset, which in essence then limits the amount of risk that you have actually taken with those dollars. So, let's say it doesn't have a loss and it actually is a gain, then you've gained on both sides as well. So it's really a beautiful concept that, that can happen with stock investing, that can happen with taking it out and buying some rental properties, letting the properties pay the policy loans back, but now you're earning out both sides. So many different things that you can do. Again, it's infinite, right?
Perfect. Well, thank you for describing that. I think that goes back to one thing that Mark did say when he said, when you're using your system for this process, it could be for good or bad. I mean, life presents obstacles and opportunities both. So in that instance, then, yeah, I love what you described of here's what it could look like if you experience a loss. That can happen when you are investing, right? But if you are banking, which is just a process with an asset, that's not a risk, doesn't have that risk like you were talking about, then you've hedged in a big way because the insurance company already owed you that money anyway. You're just using it now. All right, cool. So that was something that I really appreciated what you said, Mark, was just bringing it back home to say you becoming your own banker means you're the one in charge. You're the one making these decisions, and you can do, what you want and play to your strengths. If that person's thinking stock or somebody else is thinking stock and they're playing to their strengths, awesome. All they've done is add benefits, certainly no detriments to what they would have done otherwise. If they're going to invest in stocks, they're going to invest in stocks. But anytime you can hedge, then I love it. Anything else from what Mark brought up that struck y'all?
I just had a thought about all the other places that you could store money. There's typically some sort of drawback if you use it. So like if I store my money in a savings account and I use it, well, now I'm not earning interest on that anymore because it's not in the account. If I store my money in the stock market, well, I kind of have to time when I use that, right? If I need to use it and the market's down, you're like, oh, I don't want to sell now. Or if the market's up, you're like, oh, I don't want to sell now because what if it goes up higher? There's a drawback to that. Even real estate, kind of the same thing. I mean, to access the money that you've put into that, you're either going to have to sell the property or go through a bank and get a loan against the value. Like there's all these hurdles. Whereas if you're storing that inside a dividend paying life insurance policy, There is no drawback to using it. Your money is the increase of your cash value, of your death benefit, all those things continue. Using it is encouraged, even not just there's not a drawback, but yeah, go take it, go do whatever you want to do. Nothing changes. Just pay it back. Pay it back. And nothing changes in the future. Whereas I can't think of another place that has no drawbacks, no penalties for using that money that you have stored there.
Okay, so Brandon has to hold off. He's not allowed to speak yet. He just has to stand there and watch us. But let me take advantage of an opportunity that I see here. I love what you're saying. Excuse me. I love what you're saying, Becca. But being in the position I am, this is going to be fun for me. And I think good conversation. All right, so Rob, Tricia, Mark, what would be somebody's counter to what Becca just said? What would possibly be a mental hurdle in their mind in vetting this concept or trying to understand this concept where they're thinking, oh, but what about this? Or, well, isn't there also this? All right, Tricia literally put her hand up. So go ahead, and ladies first.
Because immediately it's like, but you just said you have to pay it back, and you just said that you have to pay interest on it. So that seems like a hurdle to some people. Why would I want to do that?
Very good. All right, so let's leave it at that for a moment, perhaps. Anything else stick out in y'all's mind where you think, well, yeah, but people could say this? Because I've got one, but I'm feeling it. Go ahead, Mark, sir.
Yeah, sometimes I hear, because people don't see it for what it is, they say, but I can't afford any more bills. I can't afford the premium because it just feels like another bill to them, another expense. I'm tapped out.
So feeling like the premium is a bill when it comes to loans, paying back the loans and paying interest. Yeah, lots of conversation around there. Rob, anything stick out to you that we hadn't mentioned already?
I think the other thing that tends to be common is people who get hung up on the product side of it is, well, it's a rate of return issue. Thinking about it from that angle is, well, I can get a better return if I put the money someplace else, even though, like Becca just talked about, you have all these other things that are at play, really, preventing you from using that money if it's residing there. But I would say that's a common one. And I think that's just kind of bred into people's minds in the conventional system of, well, it's a bigger number, so it's better. And that it's automatically, that's just what it is. And that's not how it works. You have to look at all aspects of, where the money resides, whatever asset it's in. You have to look at the entire picture in that concept.
Okay, I love it. Bills from the premium, paying loan and interest back, the ROR issue. And then here's the one that stuck out to me is I can distinctly remember a particular conversation with somebody who has not implemented the concept at that time. And the hang up was, well, yeah, but those advantages come after you do this in year one or this in year two. So the capitalization phase, right? But biting the bullet, so to speak, as a layperson would put it. Yeah, but to get there, I got to do this. Well, to get the revenues in year 5 from a business, you got to open up day 1, right? And get to work. So, all right, cool. All right, that was fun for me. So, and we're going to touch on some of these at depth, so I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, Becca. All right, now let's address, this handsome fella, my buddy Brandon from Texas, in the room, who has no idea what exactly is going on. He's familiar with conversation, what he's hearing, but he doesn't know exactly what we're doing. All right, so this is a thought exercise that I've anticipated doing on the channel, and we're in that very active doing it right now. Brandon, you are currently in the hot seat. Here's what's going to happen. Let's see, Mark, if you would, sir, pick us a number between 3 and 86.
I'd love to. I am going to follow Becca's lead, and I'm going to choose page 3.
Nice. All right, Brandon, if you don't have a copy of the book, grab you a copy of the book. You got to go to page 3, sir, and give us some feedback. I'll give you a moment here, okay? So 3 is really where the book starts. It's an introduction. So Nelson has multiple editions, okay? Spanish edition, English editions. So the 5th edition has an introduction that's not present in others, which is really cool. And I do agree with what was said earlier. You know, what came to mind, Becca, when you said page 86 or 85 was Stephen Covey, right? Isn't he the one who says start with the end in mind? No. Yeah, it's him, isn't it? But that concept anyway of start with the end in mind. Sometimes it just seems like, Genesis and Revelation have some really important things that we need to know about. I would say the same thing is true about the BYOB book. So, all right, Brandon, I bought you a few moments. What maybe strikes you from this introduction?
Well, there's a few things. Luckily, I have notes on my book, right?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. See, I didn't even think about that. And some of y'all might be like that. I'm the whole plain page guy. I feel like see there? So that just speaks to me as a person, I guess. I'm like, I can't I'm a note taker. I got journals.
That's why you get 2 copies, Jesse.
Interesting.
No, I can't do it. I mean, philosophically, on principle, I can't do it. Can't do it.
Yeah, so when you guys lifted your books up, I could see where everything was highlighted. I'm like, wait, they picked out some of the same things that I had. So it's pretty clear. Basically every sentence on here, maybe. So there's in that right column there, kind of near the top, it says, it is a well-known fact that banks make more money during times of low interest rates than when rates are high. So, one of the tenets that Nelson has is to rethink your thinking. And I think like this example is one of those, right? Like that at face value, most people would say that doesn't make sense, right? Like higher interest rates are going to make banks more money, right? And so how is it that that statement's true, right? And, the answer is like the velocity, right? The amount of people that are coming to the bank to borrow money over and over and over and over and over again is making the banks more money. And then if we put ourselves in the seat of the banker and we're using our own system that we created to do that, then we can have examples of that in our own life and our own ecosystem of financing the things that we need in our life. And so it's still like, even me giving that description, my brain's going like, okay, what does that really look like? And I'm sure everybody listening and is thinking about it, especially if they've heard that for the first time, like still probably a very foreign thought and a very foreign concept, but that's going to be my example that I throw out to you guys.
I love it. The velocity and the volume that the bank is experiencing when people are coming to them at low interest rates. I love talking with business owners, Brandon, who we're talking about their year. And hopefully, in the best scenarios, they've had their best year yet. But here's where I always like to try and, broaden their view of the world at large. And their role in it, you just had your best year yet. I'm happy for you. Congratulations. But when it comes to banking, the financing of your business, banks are making money when interest rates are high. Banks are making money when interest rates are low. Tricia, your guy that does stocks or doesn't do stocks, or other people that do this, don't do that. I'm not saying don't do business, don't do investing. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, in all these scenarios, banks win. And when there's a business owner who's saying, man, I hit that $300,000 mark, $300,000, money in the business, amazing, great year. And I'm like, all right, now knowing what you know about banking, let's make sure we understand, what does that mean to the bank? Who's really making more money from you doing whatever business it is, laundromat, like whatever it is that you're doing? Who's really the biggest winner because of your business? If you're not doing banking for yourself, it's somebody else. All right, what struck y'all from that?
I'll jump in here. I think Brandon did a great job of highlighting that. But
Literally, I see what you did there, Rob. Highlighting that.
But I will say, like, what I think really stands out about the particular section that Brandon highlighted was most people don't think about low rates, meaning the bank's doing better. But when you think about if the prime rate's 2%, and that's what banks are kind of basing their rates off of, and then they're charging the market 4%, like that's a pretty big spread versus if prime rate's 8% and they're doing 10%. Well, number one, in the higher rate environment, people are probably borrowing less money, meaning that they can't afford as much in those environments, where in what Brandon's talking about with the low rates, now I have this significantly higher margin on a significantly higher volume of money. So that's where they're making, that's where that starts to make sense for the average person, because they're not really thinking about it in those terms. It's high margin and high volume of dollars that's taking place in a low rate environment versus a high rate environment might be lower volume of dollars, seemingly higher rate. So they're not making as much on that margin that they're lending on. Granted, we all know about the Federal Reserve and where technically it's all infinite with the way things work today, but that's a whole different podcast. So
Could I just make a quick comment about that? I think that most people would say if the bank is making 2 and charging 4, I'm sorry, they're spending 2 and charging 4. If you ask most people, what's the bank making? What do most people say? They would say, well, they're making 2%. That sounds fair. I mean, that sounds fair. But it's not 2%. It's 100%, right? They're making 100% of their money back. And when you factor in the idea that that's actually not even their 2% that they're using, it's your 2%. They're using your deposits to do that. So like, it is a beautiful business model. Somehow they've convinced all Americans, or even worldwide, to give them all of our income. We're going to give all of our income to you so you can run your business model. And then you're going to give us back, a few dollars here and there. Like, it's kind of wild when you start thinking about it in those terms. I think that maybe the typical way of thinking about things is certainly serving the banking institutions. They have no reason to correct us.
So that's exactly what I was going to say, the first part, but so everybody needs to go back and listen. Go back 60 seconds, listen to everything Becca said. I was going to ask somebody to do the math on what Rob was describing, because I can remember where I was. I can remember who I was talking with. I can remember what we were talking about when it dawned on me the first thing that you described, Becca, about when so what I'm going to ask is, say the numbers again. And I'm a visual guy. Maybe I should screen share. I'm going to write it out here. But you see what I'm saying? If the difference is 1% and 2%, can we do that? Can we use that simple math? All right, because I want to drive that point home.
I think that it's helpful anytime we're talking about interest rates. It's helpful to put it into real dollars first. So instead of 1% and 2%, let's use $1 and $2. What is that? That looks healthy. If I give you $1 and I get $2 back, what is my return on my dollar? I've doubled my money, right? So if you put that back into percentages, if I use 1% to gain 2%, I've doubled my money. That's not a 1% gain. That's a 100% gain. And so that's kind of that's the wonderful game that the banks are playing.
And then to follow up with, I think Rob also said in a higher interest rate, it was like 8%, and they're making 10%, right? So what is that split? That
only a 25% difference.
25%, right?
And then the other layer is reiterating Becca's second point, which is, whose money are they doing this whole shell game with anyway? So good. So good. Brandon, was there anything else you want to tell us from that section? Or you guys, was there anything else you want to tap on that Brandon showed us from page 3?
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, there's like a lot of stuff highlighted in there. There's a lot of thoughts in my mind in that regard. But yeah, it's that next paragraph, two paragraphs down. Like this is building a system that puts you in a great advantage is not a get rich quickly kind of plan or a scheme, right? And so I think that's the other hurdle people run into is like, I guess you mentioned it briefly, but the capitalization period, the time, what can you do? What's the utilization when I'm just starting to implement this, right? And people are kind of stumbling over that, small, really irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, what they perceive as a hurdle in the beginning. And so it prevents them from seeing like even 4, 5, 6 years down the road, what a beautiful position this puts you in. And I don't know about you guys, but if you look back 4 or 5 years from today, like it feels like it was just like yesterday or last week, right? So this time actually flies much quicker than we think. But I love to remind folks and remind myself like that this is kind of a well-beaten path by people that have understood this for generations or, hundreds, a couple hundred years at least, that this is a very great process and a great beneficial thing for you and your family and businesses to implement in their lives. But it does take a little bit of time, not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but it does take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I like
Absolutely.
that. It ties into what we were talking about with it being a foundation, right? I don't know if any of you are familiar with building process and stuff. I have two brothers that are superintendents in construction. So where they spend the vast majority of time putting a building together is the foundation. It's laying the proper footings. It's putting down the right basis in order to build the building correctly. And that's what we're doing. It's putting down that foundation. But once it's down and everything starts to flow, that's when the real progress appears to be made. But you have to start there. If we don't start there, then it's just not gonna work well. And I mean, there's biblical parables that tie into that too, as we're all aware. But it's just really interesting to see how anything really good does take time and it takes some effort to get going. But once it does, it's amazing.
Well, listen, Rob, the parables might be obvious to us. That doesn't mean that you can't mention them as you strike you. So I would encourage you to mention them as they strike you. Yeah, y'all know what it's like driving by somewhere and you see guys there, the trucks, the raw red dirt. Here in North Carolina, it's red dirt, y'all. Y'all got different dirt in different places of the country. Rob probably has the richest soil out of all of us. Ours is dirt, and you Texas folks. Well, anyway, but it seems like nothing's going on, right? But then there's one day you drive by that job site and it's vertical, and you're like, oh man, it's going on now, right? So that thing that you said, Rob, about it appears that those appearances can be deceiving and telling. Beautiful. All right, so yeah, I'm halfway eating. I'm not exactly drinking this drink. This is lots of green vegetables or whatever. I don't know. My buddy Jadu just stepped in off camera, dropped off a green drink. He'll do that for me sometimes. So neat. All right. I'm glad we got to that exercise, and that worked out good, Brendan, because we were able to put you on the spot and along with everybody else. This has been a lot of fun for me. We do have 2 topics for the day. I want to field them. People have asked for it. We're going to give it to them. Let's start with savers or losers. That's a phrase that I've picked up from Robert Kiyosaki, where he's trying to get people to notice how, and I don't want to say too much here, I want y'all to be able to run with it. But one of the points I believe that he is making is that because of the inflationary environment that we're all in, if you're just saving, I'm going to say it that way, because I think there's virtue in saving. So I'm going to go ahead and establish that. If you're just saving, you're going to be losing. What does he mean, or what do you think of when you hear that phrase?
Well, I would like to jump in and just say, in some ways, it depends on where you're saving. So I'm going to assume that Robert Kiyosaki, when he's saying savers are losers, he's talking about people saving in a typical savings account, right? And they might be getting 1% on their money, maybe even in an online savings account, they manage to get 3 or 4. Okay, now that we're in a little bit higher interest rate environment. But what is our inflation rate, right? And I think that answering that question might be impossible in some ways because they manipulate the numbers so much that, they like to tell us what an inflation rate is. But we all know when we go to the grocery store and buy eggs and they're double the price as they were just a couple of years ago, then I'm not sure that it's only 5-6% of inflation. But regardless, whatever that number might be, by the end of the year, you haven't earned enough to keep up with inflation. So you're actually at the end of the year sitting with less money in your savings account, assuming it's in a typical savings vehicle at the bank.
Yeah, I think what Trish is highlighting is just the erosion of purchasing power. What $1 bought a year ago doesn't buy the same amount today. And I think we've all seen that. And I think that's what gives people an illusion sometimes of that things are more expensive. It's not that they're more expensive, it's that your money just buys less. And that's the hard thing I think for a lot of people to comprehend. But I think tying into what where you were going with that, when a person is saving, because it's close, it's tangible, I can see it in my account or it's in cash, you think it's safe in many ways, but it just, that's not the reality. And I think that's really what Mr. Kiyosaki is trying to tell us is like, okay, if I'm saving in going to what Tricia was saying, where it's saved makes all the difference in the world. Because if I'm only saving in cash, I'm only saving in the bank, well, it feels safe and I have quick access to it, but that comes at a cost, and that cost is that erosion in the purchasing power. So we have to think about, well, if we are going to save, then where should we save? And I think that's where it really makes people chase these, rates of return, and makes people look for these areas that maybe they wouldn't normally do. Like, I feel like I have to put my money at risk now because I'm worried that it won't buy me what it used to. And again, that's fine. The rate of return's fine, but at what cost? And that's where a lot of people are kind of missing that aspect as well. So just some initial thoughts I had on that.
Is it accurate then to say that inflation is the rising cost of goods? Is that what inflation is? Is it the rising cost of goods? Of course, Tricia, now for everybody that doesn't know, we recently had a very competitive game amongst ourselves. Not to be published. I regret maybe not having that recorded, Becca. Of all the days to not hit record, that's the last time I'll mention it. I'll let it go. We all make mistakes. But man, Tricia came out on top in a fun and awesome way in that competitive scene. So fun.
Once I found out it was about how quick you hit the button too, man, I was like on it.
Right. Okay, so you're shaking your head about, no, inflation is not the rising cost of goods.
And honestly, this is just something that I so want to drive home for people, because I hear all of the time how it's the greedy capitalist, it's the greedy corporations, it's the business people that are driving up the price of goods, which is really antithetical to the free country we live in, or that we're supposed to live in, because that is the foundation of our country, right? With small businesses and being free to run our own businesses, and having, free market. But so when we think that that is the cause, then we're looking at the wrong thing altogether. Whereas the cause of inflation is when our lovely banking system decides to inflate the number of dollars that we have. And all we have to do to look back at this is just in the last 5 years with COVID. And all of a sudden the government is, printing all of this extra money in order to solve everybody's problem. And I remember at that time, I was like, oh dear Lord, we are going to be paying for this. There is no such thing as a free lunch, people. And have we not paid for that explosion of printing of dollars, because then our dollars become worth less. So, it's kind of like if you take this just simple example, if you had a silver coin could buy you a fish at the fish market, and suddenly the silver coin that you are taking to the fisherman at the market is only half the weight of what it was previously. He's now going to need 2 of those in order for you to buy the fish. It's so simple, just supply and demand, but we are not educated in that. And so we just want to blame the fishermen. But that's not where the blame lies. The blame lies in the printing of all of these extra dollars. And of course, today it's not even printing, right? It's just, let's just type them in on a computer. It's just digital numbers. And so that's just something that kind of something I like to get on my soapbox about, I guess, or does get that me fired up, because I think if the American people don't start to recognize where the cause of inflation is coming from, then we are putting the blame in all the wrong places.
Can I give a recent example then? Because the example doesn't matter, but it's on my mind because I just saw where, because of our President Trump's maneuvers, that there is a company, Apple, who's going to be bringing a certain number of jobs home here to the U.S. for this part of their, construction of watches and phones and etc. And I'm the kind of guy that loves to see thriving American independence in business, okay? But knowing what I know now from the things like what you're describing, Tricia, what does that actually mean Apple is probably going to adjust? Prices on things. Because they're having to buy more stuff, move more stuff that interrupted how they were normally doing business, right? So I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying this is worth noting. This is worth noting. So the customer pays for everything that goes into whatever the thing is. It doesn't matter if it's my coffee cup, doesn't matter if it's the BYOB book. This book is not separate from, what we're talking about right here. The big bad business owner, right? I couldn't agree more. So I'm just saying that's something that, I have both those things going on in my mind right now. I can think of another great company. I'm not endorsed by them or sponsored by them. That would be neat, interesting. I don't know. Anyway.
I will caveat that. Let me just say this. I want to say it. I know that it can be spoken of as the greedy corporations. Well, sometimes our bigger corporations are in bed with the politicians. And when they are receiving the bailouts from the banks, then I do think they're just as guilty. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you've got to envision a spider web of there are lots of things that we're touching on right here, going on at the same time, multiple things being true. And that's what I was trying to describe, that I feel, strongly about, great companies like, say, Origin. It's a company that's making stuff here in the U.S. They got a clothing, apparel, everything from, dirt to the shirt, as they say it. Okay. I love that. But what does that mean? That means that their stuff's going to cost more if somebody wants to, because it's done here, and all that stuff. So that's something that stuck out in my mind from that. And don't hold me on the number, but I feel like that COVID area, something like 20% inflation occurred, meaning that out of all the dollars, physical dollars that existed in our country pre-COVID, was changed by 20% more in that itty bitty span of time. Okay, Rob's saying I got it low. Okay, I'd rather be conservative.
Brilliance.
Okay. So I'd rather be conservative.
40% of the entire money supply was printed between 2020 and 2023.
You're the man. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. All right, thanks, Rob, for having me on that. Becca, what do you say?
So can we talk for a second about a vineyard? You know me, I love a good analogy, right? So if you had a vineyard and you were to cut off a branch of that vine, and let's say the branch had plenty of grapes on it, what would you need to do, or what would you expect to happen to that branch that you cut off? Is it going to continue to produce fruit, or would it just wither? Like it has no choice but to wither because it's been cut off from what it was supplying it with everything it needs. So if you think back, can anybody tell me what happened in 1971 regarding?
We went off the gold standard.
Yep.
We went
Cut
off the gold standard. Of course, temporarily, right? All these maneuvers are always temporary, but now here we are in 2025, and we're still in this fiat currency. So if you don't know what fiat currency means, fiat just means by declaration. I call it because I said so money. So we have this money, these paper bills that are valuable because the government says so, but they've been cut off from anything of real value. So inflation is really just the withering it has no choice. The dollar has no choice but to wither because it's been cut off from anything that's really valuable. Okay, so if we go back to our vineyard, you can actually take a branch that's been cut off and graft it back into the vine, right? You can reattach that to the vine and it will begin to flourish again. And so I think what we do when we exchange our withering dollars for premium, it's like we're grafting our dollars back into something that naturally grows, that's connected to something of real value, that these are real assets. This is not just money that's been created out of nothing. I mean, these insurance companies are investing in things that are real. So that a lot of times people ask, well, what if the dollar crashes? What would happen if the dollar crashes? Well, it would be these real assets over here would be readjust or revalued in whatever the new measurement tool is, right? But they're real things.
Yep.
And so I think anytime when we're thinking about where we save, if we can graft into something that's real, that is naturally growing, that is naturally producing fruit, instead of just this fractional reserve fiat currency system that's just kind of a house of cards, honestly, then that's the reason they can guarantee that's the reason they can provide this stability, because it's based on real things. So I think inflation in our current society and our current monetary system is not a bug, it's a feature. It has no choice. It has no choice but to wither, because it's not connected to anything.
I think that was a grape analogy, and I'm not one to whine about analogies.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, father of young kids, maybe?
Dad jokes here.
Pull that out of your database jokes. Here's another analogy for you guys. Like, we're talking about inflation and fiat currency. Like, have you ever tried to hold ice in your hand? That's like holding cash in your hand, right? A lot of people think of it that way. It's just melting, like it's melting away, right? Versus tangible assets, right? Is it the suit that you could purchase with an ounce of gold, that's gotten more expensive? That ounce of gold back, 100 years ago was going to buy you a custom suit. And same thing, an ounce of gold, which has gone up in value according to the US dollar, right? That's about what it's going to cost to get a custom suit made, right? So it's not the ounce of gold that went up per se. It's just the value, or the amount of money, the amount of fiat currency, the amount of IOUs that a non-government, non-elected group of folks met at Jekyll Island and decided this is what we're going to do, right? Look at the Creature from Jekyll Island book, and you'll see what I'm talking about, right? The Federal Reserve is not federal, but so those are a couple of things. And so Kiyosaki was telling us that we are in a debt-based monetary system, right? And so when you use other people's money, like the bank is using anybody that puts their money on deposit with the bank, they're using other people's money to make more money, right? Robert Kiyosaki is a master at using other people's money to buy assets, to make more money. Like, if I go and pay cash for a house and I rent it out, I'm going to make some money, right? No debt. I'm going to make some money. But if I go and leverage the bank's money that you guys put in the bank that then they loan to me to go buy a house, right? Then I'm using other people's money. I still have to have a little bit of my own capital into that because that's the way it's designed, right? But my return on investment in that scenario is greater. My return on investment may be in the 20 to 24% range versus if I paid cash for it, it might be in the 2 or 3 or 4% range from a ROI perspective, right? So I think when Kiyosaki says savers are losers, those are kind of like the scenario that he's painting and what he's describing when he says that.
And he's not wrong. Like
Yeah.
when he's leveraging other people's money and he's going and buying real assets like real estate, now not only is he making money on that money with cash flow, but in a scenario like COVID, look what happened to the housing market. The prices went right through the roof. So that was a hedge against inflation because he had hard assets that are growing in value to keep up with that inflation. So in so many ways, it's very similar to this whole idea we were talking about. And I think we're going to get to it where we were talking about why would I pay interest on my money? Well, because I'm actually using the life insurance company's money. So I'm actually doing the same principle of using other people's money, right, in order to then leverage those dollars to go do something else with them. And it still is acting as a hedge against inflation because the life insurance company is highly invested in things like real estate and hard assets. That gives me that hedge without me having to be necessarily, unless I want to be, the real estate investor myself. And I still get the guarantee of that growth on those dollars. So I don't know if I'm kind of seeing the parallels there is what I'm trying to bring out between what Robert Kiyosaki is saying to do with real estate is very similar to what we're doing in the infinite banking concept through the life insurance company.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
I like where you're going with that, Tricia. And I think just tying back into like Brandon's example of, some ice in your hand. And I think this also ties into like what Robert Kiyosaki's talking about. What if, though, we control the environment? And that's really the difference.
Right.
If we now are in a freezer and it's not in our hand, but in something that is already frozen, it stays. It doesn't change. And that's really what we're talking about is being able to control the environment in which those dollars reside. Where and that's really all that Robert Kiyosaki is kind of doing with what he's talking about too, is just changing the environment by continuing to use the debt-based system, as opposed to just quote unquote saving, where we can both preserve in the environment and create more at the same time naturally because the environment's already rich for it. And that, I think that's a little bit different than, it's how we change our mindset and think about where the money resides that makes all the difference in the world in this particular case.
Yeah, one last thing too on his deal with debt is we're incentivized by the policies that the government's put in place as well to hold debt. And what I mean by that is when you hold debt on a property, even if it's at your own home, you have certain write-offs, right, when you do your tax returns. So they're incentivizing us as a society to borrow money. So that's another little piece about it too that often gets overlooked.
So don't forget that lobbyists are working with companies that maybe we should keep that in mind, all right, and do business with companies that align with our values, right, Tricia? Don't forget that the U.S. government came for people's gold and just said, oh no, gold's now illegal. Something that comes from dirt is now illegal. All right, now I'm just speaking for myself, okay? This is just sharing some feelings here, I guess. Let's not forget that happened, okay? So inflation is not the rising cost of goods. It's like Rob was giving us the stats and the numbers for earlier. It's an inflated supply of money from this Federal Reserve that's neither federal nor reserve. like's been mentioned. And Tricia, you gave us a segue, so I guess we should take it. Unless anybody has any strong feelings on something else concerning savers or losers or anything you'd like to leave people with. I do see that the blue collar and white collar roots of just going to a job, working a career, maybe, and this is if you're doing the right things, right? And plenty of people are not doing the right things. But if you are saving money somewhere, if you are making typical investments, modern investments nowadays, you're probably going to lose. Right? So eyes wide open.
Can I just say something real quick, Jesse? And this is something that has been a mindset shift for me, because we were savers. We were the people that saved up and paid cash for everything. And we're really happy about that. Like, we don't have debt, right? That's what we're supposed to celebrate, right? And so we're about 5 years in now to our first policy. And when we started to use it more heavily, and I'm seeing this policy loan balance, I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like how that feels. I'm not used to owing anything. So what I've had to do is change my mindset and kind of change the way I look at that, as that loan balance in our previous way of doing things would have been money that we just paid cash, and now it's gone forever. It's gone forever. I cannot recover that. Whereas now I have the opportunity to put that back. Now, why would I want to do that? A couple of reasons. Number one, I can use it again. And number two, every time I put it back, that compound interest curve, it didn't get interrupted like it would have if it was in a savings account. It just jumps back right up on the curve where it would have been if I never would have used it. And so when I think about it that way, it's almost like, wow, this is like a time machine for my money. I can put it back later and it goes back to the place it was going to be anyway. Like, that's kind of wild to me. So I think if you are a saver, I was a saver, I was a loser, whatever, by Robert Kiyosaki's definition. A lot of times you have to reframe how you're seeing that this loan is not a debt. It's a liability, like, kind of, I guess.
Not with your banker's hat.
Because not with your banker's hat on, right? Because if I don't ever pay that off, nobody's coming for me, right? It's just advantageous that I do. Of seeing that as an opportunity to continue the uninterrupted compounding of those dollars, even while I'm able to use them and access them. So that was a big mindset shift for this loser saver from times past.
Well, I'm never going to call you a loser. So I should have said, I did really like, Brandon, your analogy about the ice in the hand. That's helpful to me. And then Rob, how you describe the environment of the freezer on the back end of that, super helpful. Becca, what you're talking about right there, I know that some way on my channel, I'm going to try and help people visualize what I'm going to express to y'all now. I'm still working through it. But if we'll think big picture, long range, like Nelson talks about, rule number one, principle number one, think long range. If we put money, let me do this. If we put money that we earn somewhere, okay? I'm going to slide it into the book, okay? Could be anything. I'm going to slide it into the book. I think mentally it would help a lot of people who are starting to learn about this concept to differentiate what's going on by visually seeing their money go somewhere. Now, traditionally, this is going to be a commercial bank, right? They're going to take money and they're going to put it somewhere else. Here's a beautiful drawing from my Lana. I got this on my desk with me today from my little daughter, my little girl, my princess. Traditionally, people are putting money in the bank and then they take it out and there's nothing to show for it. All right, follow me on this. I'm going to try and do a good job of this. Y'all give me your feedback, okay? And we don't think about it. We earn our money, we spend our money. It's ours. We can do what we want. I think that if people began envisioning a shoebox, a whatever, an envelope, something, and they put Jesus Christ on it, literally wrote the words Jesus Christ, or Lana Durham, my daughter's name, okay? somebody other than yourself, right? Because depending on what your worldview is, right, you might say, well, that's not my money, that's the Lord's money. I'm just a steward, right? So at the end of the day, if I could just detach, all I'm trying to do here is detach from how conventional banking is done. If I could detach and say, well, this is Lana's money, and eventually it probably is going to be, right? What I'm doing, what Lauren's doing, what we're doing. So if I take money from here, I owe the Lord, or I owe my daughter, I owe my grandchildren that aren't here yet. I owe somebody. I should put that back. I don't feel like I'm doing a good job, but I do know that these principles of detachment, I think, are going to be helpful for people to wrap their minds around. We're used to putting money in a bank account and spending it, and we don't feel a debt there. But there is, actually there is.
Jesse, we're always borrowing. We're either borrowing from someone else or we're borrowing from our future.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we don't put it back with interest, that future is not the same as it would have been.
Yep.
I love it.
All right, I'm going to jump on the segue. Tricia, you're the one that brought it up. Why, and these are maybe kind of two things, right? Why would I pay interest on my money is how people will say it sometimes in error, okay? So let's talk through that maybe. But then once people do realize that, well, I'm not borrowing my money, then let's address that topic from that direction of, okay, well, why would I pay interest at all? Why don't you kick us off?
If while you were listening to this video, you were inspired and you thought of someone in particular, send this video to them. Let it be something that they can watch and that you can talk about. And my hope is that you do live and leave a lasting legacy.